everyone. I'm John Munns, kind of a Broughton transplant, and visiting today with Herb Zaske, a longtime Broughton resident. And Herb, how you doing?
Real fine, thank you, John.
Well, we've got, I think, a special treat for not only folks from the Broughton area, but also from anyone that seems statewide, national-wide. We're going to talk a little bit about the old days at Broughton, about the community itself, and also about the Lake Marion Ballroom and a visitor that happened to show up in the early 20s. And I think before we get going to all that, we're just going to kind of start at the beginning now. You've been from around Broughton most all your life, right?
Yeah, that's right. I was 1 year old when my dad moved down to Broughton, and I've lived there all my life.
Now, what year would that have been? Not wanting to give away your age or anything. But.
We moved there in 1919.
Okay.
And so I was a year old, and so you can guess my age from that.
Now, is that the home place where you're at right
That's
now?
right. I'm still on the same place that I was when we moved there.
Now, I imagine all the years that you've been there, you've seen quite a few changes, not only in the community itself, but the general area.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, farms were smaller at that time, and there was a creamery in town. Just about every farmer hauled his cream into town every other day. After a while, it was milk, and they'd haul the milk in every day. Mm-hmm. And there was a produce. They'd bring their eggs there, or they'd take the eggs to the grocery store in exchange for groceries. And, well, now we have the supermarkets. Everything has just changed.
Yeah. Well, we have some photos here of the old Broughton. And why don't you just explain a few of these here. Now, this, I assume, is Main Street of Broughton.
Yeah, that's the Main Street of Broughton. And actually, the one building is still standing on the corner where Wagner Pharmacy is. It used to be the Redmond harness shop, and from there on then was the produce, and it just goes on down the street. Then the bank was robbed, by the way, at one time, or somebody tried to rob it. There's quite a story about that, but we won't go into that.
How about this? Now, is that
yeah, that's on the other side of the street again. So this is the east side of the street, and this is the west side.
Okay, now about what year of Broughton was
I
this?
would surmise that this must have been in about from 1900 to 1907, right in that era.
Okay.
And because, like the next picture you have
this,
here...
this, of course, is not a real pretty side of Broughton.
No, they had a bad fire, and I got this information from Lily Schwartzruck. She was right across the street from the fire. She said she saw it. She said it was not pretty, but it did burn the blacksmith shop, the post office, and behind the post office there was an opera house or a dance hall where the community gatherings were held. And that was in this picture here, and West Photography was also in that. And you'll notice most of these pictures, it says photo by West, so he had actually, but it was not a pretty sight, and that was about 1907, or 1910, when the fire was.
So there was actually a dance hall in Broughton.
Yes, there was.
See, I was not aware of that, so prior to the Lake Marion Ballroom days.
Some called it the Opera House, and some called it the dance hall, but whenever they had a family or community gathering, that's where it was, behind the post office.
Huh. And total of 4 buildings probably went.
Yeah, it wiped out the entire block on one side of the block. And so it wasn't a pretty sight, but it did rebuild and kind of bounce back.
Sure. Now it was shortly after that, wasn't it then, that the Lake Marion Ballroom actually came into existence?
I believe the Lake Marion Hotel was built first. Okay, and I believe that was in 1902, if I remember correct.
So the Lake Marion Hotel was actually out there prior to even Broughton as we saw it here.
Right,
okay.
Right, yes. It was quite a place, Lake Marion itself. It was called Lake Marion, Broughton, Minnesota. And the only road that went out from Broughton to Lake Marion was the road that goes from the Broughton Oil Company straight north, and it went as far as Dale Tottenham's house and turned west by our place where I live, and it came out to the blacktop where Jerry Kuyas lives, and it went west about a half mile and then straight north past what used to be Sylvia Kramer's place, and it ended up by Orville Zimmerman's place on the Lake Marion Road, then onward to where you live by the shores of Lake Marion and to Hutchinson. That was the state road. the only way to get to Hutchinson.
And for those people that have been in that area, that now is a county road. Of course, it goes all sorts of different directions. You're actually on a little gravel road back there now, but that was
It's
the
a
main
township
highway.
road now, but it used to be a state highway, yes.
Oh, isn't that something?
Yeah.
Okay, now as far as you mentioned, it went past Lake Marion. Okay, at that time then, the Lake Marion Hotel, how big of a structure was that? How
Oh, the Lake Marion Hotel was a large structure. It was 75 by 45. It was a terrifically large building, and it was 14 rooms in there. And it was there 18 years before the ballroom was built, the pavilion, if you want to call it that.
Well, let's get to the ballroom now. The original Lake Marion Ballroom, now a lot of folks, of course, know where it is now. It's been there, since, I think, since about 1965 or so. But the original structure was actually down by the lake a little bit more, wasn't it?
Right. It was where the supper club is now, just a little bit to the northwest, but near the lake shore. It was not too far away from the lake shore. And it was an octagonal structure, or round, whatever you want to call it, but it was built in a sort of round, octagonal, or I believe it was.
Okay. I'm just going to interrupt you a second, Herb, and jump back to the hotel before we talk any more about the ballroom. Do you recall at what year the hotel no longer, you know, had guests or anything like that? When did it quit functioning? Are you sure?
Oh, no. I do know that in the 1930s that some of the dance bands would spend a week at Lake Marion and stay at the hotel, and that was their vacation. And there was a well-known Metro College, I don't know if I dare mention the name or not.
Sure.
The coach was Tommy Antle. It was St. Thomas College.
Oh, is that right?
They had their summer practice out there for the football team.
Well, I suppose they could come stay at the hotel.
They stayed at the hotel. They used the baseball field as their practice field, and after their practice, which they were sweaty and so on, they could all go jump in the lake and take a nice swim, and it was just kind of ideal. They loved it out there.
That's nice and handy. Before we go too much farther on talking about these things, we can give the folks a rough idea of where some of the stuff was. First of all, now this photo here would be the hotel, right?
Yeah, that is the only photo that I have come upon that shows the hotel structure itself. And like I say, it was a 14-room structure. It was a large building, and they served meals in there, and people could stay there, and it was a place of beauty, really.
Where was the hotel located now in comparison to where the present ballroom is?
I would say it's located just about approximately where the supper club is now.
Okay, that's where the hotel was, and then you mentioned the ballroom a little bit from there. And again, for the sake of those people that are more familiar with the current facilities, the ballpark itself would have actually been from the present ballroom a little bit to the west and north.
West and north, yes.
in that
I
back
believe there's a
parking
parking lot down there.
Yeah.
We used to take the road that it shows going by here and drive all the way out to the point. That was in the 30s. And we'd have a wiener roast out there.
Oh.
A group of us, yeah, and it was great. It wasn't developed completely yet, and so on and so forth.
Speaking of which, now this photo here, I believe, is actually, isn't that a picture of that shoreline before it was really?
Yeah, this is the original virgin shoreline of Lake Marion. It shows a little house there. I'm not sure if that was a bathhouse or if it was an ice house, because you know in the winter that was common at Lake Marion to be making ice out there. And in fact, the ice house at Brownton always had ice harvest in the winter and hauled the ice blocks into town, and people made a living in the summertime delivering ice to the various people.
Is that right?
Yeah, it was
Now, this
quite a day.
particular shoreline, too, Herb, we should mention, I think when we talk Lake Marion and beach house and swimming, people are automatically thinking the south shore, where it presently is by the Rod and Gun Club now, but this actually is
This
over
was
where
the
ballroom
original.
was.
The Rod and Gun Club part was not developed at all. That was called, it was Torrey's. Actually, they had a pasture there. Torrey's had a pasture there.
I remember my dad mentioning that.
Is that
it
right?
Was all, in
Yeah.
fact, it wasn't all that long ago, as recently as when Milo Wacker first moved out there. I remember quite a bit of pasture, you know, on the fencing and stuff.
Right.
And in fact, we of course live out in that area now, and we still find an occasional steel fence post.
Oh, I'll bet you do. I'll bet you do. You know, this was the Lake Marion beach, and it was a place of beauty for swimming, and it was just nice. Yeah.
Now this here would be Another shot, I guess, after the hotel was put up again.
After the hotel was put up, but you can see there's some broken down trees there. It wasn't kept up, like you would keep up a commercial beach today, but it's still nice. It's a little bit later than this one because the hotel shows there.
And at one point or another, they must have had some boats there, too.
Yeah, this got to be a little bit later.
Yeah.
The boats were lined up along the shore, and you could go rent a boat to go fishing or to just go boating. Or, there were a lot of things done with those boats. And at night, they'd usually turn them upside down in case of rain and so on and so forth. And I know some guy was telling me he went to dances and he would hide things under the boats.
Maybe a little spooning going on in those.
Right.
Now, was that also was down in the, again, I refer to the present day, because that's, for those that are just new to the area, that would again be down about where the supper club is located now in the area.
Right about where the supper club is located. And I remember going there on 4th of July celebrations, and crowds of 1,000 people were not uncommon. And they'd have fireworks displays, and kids would be throwing firecrackers, and it was told that they should throw the firecrackers in the lake so they wouldn't harm anybody, or that nobody would get hurt. But that, it was just lined deep, 10, 12 deep, all along the shore there. It was great.
Now, on the other end, we'll just move down a little bit to the south. On the other side of Lake Marion, wasn't there a gas station of some sort there? Do you recall that?
Yeah, I remember that, and that's pretty close where your house is.
I believe
in there.
so. Again, I remember my dad telling me a few stories. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, back when he used to have his band, he used to perform. There was a little store there, a gas station or something.
Yes, and little, they sold beer there in the evenings, like you say, they'd have music there, and a little place to dance, and yeah, it was a store and a gas station.
I think that's, again, for the benefit of anyone who knows where I live, I'm pretty sure that's just like about two houses down from us in that area.
Right.
Anyway, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Okay, and we mentioned the ballpark, and you mentioned the 4th of July picnics. Now this, here's an old photo. That
yeah, this is it was very traditional at that time that our class picnics would be held at Lake Marion. And of course, what was a nicer place to do it than out at the ballpark, or where there was a lot of elbow room. And there were picnic tables out there. Even on Sundays, people would come and have picnics out there at the picnic tables. Now this one in particular, I could mention a few names here of some people. On the left there is myself. I don't know what I'm holding there. I don't know what. But it was our 8th grade picnic, and aside of me is Lowell Pike, and aside of him, again, is our teacher, Miss Marie Lash. Now, right on front of Lowell is Lawrence Schluter, and we're kind of all piled up in there. Right ahead of him is Ray Stroy. Ray is quite prominent around the Sumter area. And below him there is, on front of him is Orville Rickert, who is, still lives at Broughton. Sure. And on the bottom there, way in the front, is Norman Engelmeyer. And he was a brother of Earl Engelmeyer, but we had our 8th grade picnic out there. We had a great time. You can see we were having fun.
Yeah, I was going to say, just judging from the photo looks, did you get into any trouble back then too, or you kind of grow out of that?
Well,
you don't have to
I'd kind of rather not.
As long as we're bringing back some names from the past. Now, we mentioned the ballpark, and the Lake Marion ball team played out there on a regular basis, and we've got a couple different photos.
Yeah, this one here in particular, this is taken from the Broughton files of the Broughton Bulletin, and you'll notice they only had 9 players and a manager, and that's all they needed, I guess. They didn't have relief pitchers or subs or anything, but there was Lee Volker, Knutson, Otto Zeeland, and then Henry Zeeland and Bill Pike. Bill Pike he had a hardware store in town for many years, and standing with Jim Mullen, Fred Carson, Fred Zeeland was the manager, and then Les Carsons and Barney Tadson. And of course, Barney played ball for, you can see he's quite young in there, and the baseball field up at Broughton is named the Barney Tadson.
That's right, after Barney.
Field, after Barney Tadson.
Now here's another photo. I don't know if you know any on that.
I can't pick them all out. I know that this one here was Otto Zeeland. He was the pitcher. And Bill Pike is there in the middle again. And the others, I just have a little trouble knowing, and I don't think the names are on the back here, no. So I hope I've helped you out some with
Faces
that.
from the past, yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting. The reason we're going back that far is because someone my age and most people now, you talk about the Lake Marion Ballroom or the Lake Marion Supper Club, which really has not been there all that long either. And
No.
that's all you think of.
Yeah.
I mean, to go back and see that, I mean,
Yeah.
here was a full ballpark,
Yeah.
the boat launching, a motel or hotel rather, and of course the ballroom. And we started talking a little bit about the ballroom. Let's talk a little bit more about that now. They, big names, there's some big name entertainment out there. I know, what, like in the 20s and 30s, they had some...
I remember the ballroom best from the late 1920s all through the 30s and the early 1940s. And on Sunday nights, it was very common. You had new time dances. We called them the new time. And you talked about some big name bands. I guess the biggest name that I could mention is Lawrence Welk. Lawrence played out there twice that I know of. And the second time, he was such a featured attraction that they had to get tickets in advance for him. And it was by reservation only. And of course, with some other names are Tiny Little. And I remember seeing Tiny Little on Lawrence Welk's programs once in a while. And then there was Guy DeLeo, Blue Gordon, Lynn Kern's Rhythm Club, Cliff Keys, Verlin Gieb, and there were others. But these I can offhand think of were there quite often.
What did you have to pay to go to a dance like that?
A dance like that, the ladies paid 25 cents. And the men, it was usually around 50 or 75 cents, depending on what band.
Changed it a little
However,
bit over the years.
yeah. However, when Lawrence Welk played there, I believe it was $1.50 straight for everybody.
Still quite a buy.
It was still quite a buy. Yeah, it sure was.
And also, I guess, in addition, that the modern bands you talked about, they had old-time dances. I remember talking to the likes of the late Harold Laffemacher and people like that, the Six Fat Dutchmen. I know all these people used to play out there, too.
Yeah, that was a Thursday night dance, and it was always the old time, we called it. And of course, some of the bands that I can remember, now you mentioned Lachermacher and so on and so forth, were the Six Fat Dutchmen, Slim Jim, Dutch Much. I remember Eppie Abram played with Dutch Much, and Whoopie John and the Lamplighters, that was Frank Lamp and his group, and the Deutschmeisters, Jerry Dostal, and Jerry is still around, very
Over in the
active.
Glencoe area,
Fez Fritchie and many more. I remember Wally Pickle playing with the Jerry Dostal's band.
That's right. Of course, Wally grew up around that Brownton area
Yes,
with
he
his
did.
brother Roy.
Yeah, he went to the Brownton School.
Sure.
And so we did have a lot of them there.
Is the price pretty much the same for those things?
No, it was cheaper for those dances. It was usually 25 cents admission and ladies free.
Oh.
I guess they figured if the ladies went in, the men would follow with 25 cents.
Well, some things never change.
Something, yeah. And of course, featured dances there were polkas and waltzes and a butterfly and the schottisch and sometimes some square dances and some others.
I imagine back in those days you pretty much just had your soft drinks, though. You didn't have any
Well,
spirits, so to
you
speak.
got to realize up until 1932 or 33, it was pretty much prohibition. Or maybe even 34. I remember when Franklin Roosevelt got to be president and he worked to get that prohibition repealed. But before that time, there would be white lightning vendors, if you want to call them as such. I have a good friend at Brownton who was one of them, and he laughs about it at times. But yeah, there were vendors out there, and the going price for that was 50 cents for a half pint.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So you figure that out, that'd be $8 a gallon, and he said he paid $5 a gallon for it. But it was a good night's wages, $3.
Oh, sure.
And he was telling me that he couldn't carry that 5-gallon can around with him all night, so he would try to hide some of it under one of the boats that were tipped upside down. And he came there because he was running out, and here was a couple sitting there and talking very sincerely to each other with their arms around each other, and he hated to ask them to move just so he could get his supply again.
How many people did the old ballroom? I cannot recall it, of course. About how many people could you get in there?
Oh boy, you're asking me a real tough question, but I would guess that if it was crowded, there were 90 booths in there.
Oh, okay, that's...
So that was large in itself. And then after a while, in the later years, a beer garden was added to the south end, and that took care of quite a few. But I would judge anywhere from 500 to 700, something like that, that it would hold. That would have to be a pretty good crowd.
Now, the old ballroom was circular, was it not?
Yes, either octagonal or
okay.
circular.
And then I remember kind of a big post or something that
in the
came down
center
with
of the
beers?
ballroom was,
Beers, or-
yeah, there was a weight-bearing post.
Okay.
It was about 18 inches in diameter, and it was completely covered with mirrors. A lot of them called it the center post of mirrors, and it was beauty. And oh gosh, I can remember some guys, they'd be dancing with their sweet little flower, and they'd go gliding toward that mirror just to see how graceful and handsome they looked while dancing with their little sweet charm. Yeah, the center post was of mirrors. It was.
You mentioned, you know, people being with their sweethearts or whatever. Now, the dances in those days, it was a little different. Like now, a band will take a little break each hour, but wasn't there like a bigger break somewhere throughout the night? Or
about 11:30, it was called intermission, and the dance would break for maybe 15, 20 minutes, or maybe even 25. And at that time, it was traditional that the young man was to take his lover or his sweetheart and treat her to a sandwich or a soft drink, or maybe they'd just stroll hand in hand if they were short of money beneath the oak trees. Oh yeah, that was quite traditional. When the music started up again, they all came back to the dance hall.
Beautiful countryside out there.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we talked a little bit about that big post in the middle, and that really really figured in some news, not only locally, statewide, but nationally. When was it? About the early 20s, 1921 or somewhere in there, that a mysterious guest appeared?
I was going to say in the early 1920s, but now I did find out that it was actually, as close as we can pinpoint it, about 1921.
Okay.
That this incident that you're talking about happened, and I don't know if you want to, it gave the ballroom and the surrounding area some dubious publicity.
Yeah. Well, if I understand it right, the devil supposedly came right down that center post onto the dance floor.
Well, the story as it was told to me is that the devil came sliding down the center post of mirrors, and right during a dance, and the people became frantic, and some scattered, some ran into the lake. Now, these are stories. I wasn't there. You follow me?
Oh,
these were the stories that I heard.
Many stories.
And some ran home and left their cars parked there. And the entire episode was not to have lasted long.
I was just going to ask you how long, you know, you hear all the stories, and you wonder how long something like this could last, but apparently, what, you supposedly down and out?
Yeah, it was, they said it didn't last long at all. It was just, what would I say, a scary thing for a while. And one guy even claims the last he saw the devil was he saw him walking across the lake. In all sincerity, he told me this. Now, I kind of laugh about it. You're smiling, but...
Yeah, well, who knows?
Yeah, who knows, yeah.
But there were, you'd mentioned the stories. I recall hearing stories over the years about this, of people literally jumping out of the windows of the ballroom. As a matter of fact, we have a photo here that a lot of people, it wasn't that long ago that this bridge was replaced.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Why don't you tell the folks a story about,
well,
he was a passenger, I believe.
Yeah, naturally, a lot of stories followed, but one of the stories that was told was that two fellows had come out to the dance in their Model T Ford. It was in a Model T Ford. And they became frantic. They ran to their car. The passenger jumped in the seat, and the driver of the car started cranking the car because there were no automatic starters in it at that time. He was cranking the car, and it didn't start right away, and the passenger jumped out, and he started running for Brownton. And he ran, and the driver of the car claimed absolutely 4 cranks of the car later it started. And then he got in his Model T and he started toward Brownton to pick up his passenger. And he said he didn't catch up to him until the Buffalo Creek Bridge, right in the edge of Brownton.
I was going to say, for you people that know where that's located, that was about 4 miles it took him to catch up.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the stories. Another story was that in that night of question, that there was a very brief but a very severe thunderstorm. And at the time, a repair job was being made on the hotel, and there was a lot of scaffolding up there. And now, if there was a storm, some say, well, the storm blew it down. But there was one guy said, oh, no. That devil walked by there, and with one swipe of the hand, he knocked all the scaffolding down.
Again, another story.
Another story, yeah.
But some of these people are telling these stories yet, and they seem to believe them as they're saying them, don't they?
Yeah, well, then another story that we had was, and he's still living today, a very highly respected man from Collins Township, said that the next morning he found a shoe in his grove. Not knowing whose it was or where it came from. He said, could there be something mystic about this?
Well, this made, like I said, this was national news, not only, of course, in the local papers, but the Twin Cities papers, even, I believe, Chicago.
According to files that I've read in the Brownton paper, stories that I've read, I haven't been able to find anything in the Brownton paper, and we haven't been able to find anything in a Hutch paper about it. But according to the Brownton paper, it made both the Minneapolis and St. Paul papers, and Chicago Tribune carried stories of it. And I know from some servicemen that were on the East Coast and West Coast said that they talked to people that said they had seen it on the West Coast.
Something.
And so it made national news.
Yeah. And that, of course, was before the days of radio and TV. Just think what type of situation this possibly could have been.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, it could. Oh, one more story that just comes to my mind was that there was a guy, he ran cross country, and he didn't go on the old road that I was telling you about that went back to Brownton, but he was running cross country, and he was cutting across on the north shore of Lake Addy, about where the creek joins Lake Addy, Buffalo Creek joins Lake Addy. And he was running, and he was so scared to death, and all of a sudden a jackrabbit jumped out from in front of him. And his only reaction was, out of my way, rabbit, let a man run what can run.
They want to take time to discuss it with the rabbit.
Yeah, right.
Now, we of course, have been telling the stories from the devil's side, but of course, I remember hearing stories of, it was just someone that didn't care for dances. You know, the people having the good time, maybe dressed up to scare some people.
Well, yeah, and some of the local people said it was nothing but a big joke. And then some other people said, oh, it was no joke, I was there. And, well, the story I had it was that there was a young purist who didn't like dances and such goings-on like that, and that he dressed up or masqueraded as a devil and got himself up in a cupola on top of the pavilion and came sliding down that mirrored pillar, and he tried to scare people away because he didn't like the dancing and going to dances and so on and so forth. Now, that's one story. Another story has it that people in the Brownton area were always known to have some fabled jokes or to be pulling jokes on somebody. And when you really think of it, what other community had such nicknames as Cuckoo? Cuckoo Charlie, that was a common name.
Sure.
And Slewfoot. And he was a blacksmith in town. You didn't say you were going to the blacksmith, I'm going to Slewfoot. And then there was Slicker. He ran a restaurant in town. And then there was a guy by the name we called Schnaps. And then there was a heavy-set guy, a little heavier order, and we called him Speck. Well, that's a German word for fat. And then Kluck. And Spooks. Why, I bowled together with Spooks Yankee for years. We never called him Albert. We called him Spooks. Hey, Spooks, it's your turn to bowl. And then there was Shadow. And the reason it was Shadow was he was the guy that sold the White Lightning at the dances. And if they wanted to know where to find him, he was standing against an oak tree, and they called him Shadow. And then there was Bull and Blick, and the list goes on and on. And those names are used so common that no one even smiled when they were used or when they were said. And so, was it people like that in the community who like to tell some fabled jokes and then elaborate on it? It's hard to say. And then there were some that said this lightning, or this thunderstorm, that it was maybe just a mirage, that during the flashes of lightning, the lights out there, you know, we didn't have REA in those days. They had a regular light plant, that the lights would go on and off and on and off, and that maybe people saw some things that they thought they saw, and maybe they didn't see them at all, that it was just a mirage. And
then the
like you say,
imagination kind of went from there.
Yeah, the imagination went. Who knows? Well, I guess I'd like to...
It can go either way.
Yeah. Was it a mirage? Or was it just a fabled joke that people wanted to elaborate on? Was it a purist who wanted to scare people away? Or was it really an appearance of the devil? No. But on the other hand...
Well, whatever it was, it left us with a lot of memories and a lot of stories.
I guess what I'd have to say, you be the judge.
Because we do have those to talk about like we did today, Herb. And before we leave, we should mention now the hotel itself, all these memories, that went, I believe, in 1960.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
the hotel went before that.
Okay, maybe about 1960. And 5 years later, the ballroom that we've been talking about burned down.
Yes.
There was a wedding dance there. I know Harlow Penaz and Mary Mormon had their wedding dance there that night, and then the ballroom itself burned.
The Deutschmeisters played there that night.
Okay.
That I remember. I wasn't there, but I remember telling about it. I was told that Tommy Dorsey had played there just the previous fall, too, because, so it was a big name place.
They're both gone. Of course, we have the present-day ballroom on top of the hill now. That got moved to the top of the hill. Yeah. And has been there since that point.
And so was that ballpark fund that we talked about.
That's a parking lot now for the new ballroom.
And only memories remain. And, but each did much to publicize the Broughton community. And since they were referred to as the Lake Marion Ballroom, the Lake Marion Hotel, and the Lake Marion Ballpark of Broughton, or near Broughton. The ballpark itself is still a parking lot, but I remember some pretty good baseball games played out there. There was semi-pro even, and there were crowds there on Sunday afternoon, and the popcorn stand there, and vendors, and it was just a place that I just can't forget.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people can't, and Herb, it was nice visiting with you about this, and hope we brought back a few memories for some folks watching.
John, thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Herb.